In this video for section 1.5, we're going to talk about the discriminant. When we have the graph of a quadratic function, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, it makes a shape called a parabola. And the solutions to the equation 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c are the x-intercepts of the parabola. So we've been working on solving equations in this section, but when we look at the graph, the solutions that we're finding are telling us the x-intercepts of the parabola. So for example, we did this problem earlier where we solved 8x squared plus 2x minus 1 equals 0. And the solutions that we found were negative 1/2 and positive 1/4. And so what this tells us about the graph is that there are two x-intercepts, one at negative 1/2 and the other one at positive 1/4. So a parabola might have two x-intercepts, one x-intercept, or no x-intercepts. And we're going to see some examples here in a second. So when we calculate the quantity b squared minus 4ac, this is called the discriminant, and it should look familiar to you because it's the part of the quadratic formula that is under the square root sign. We don't include the square root sign itself. And this is not a solution method because it doesn't tell us what the solutions are. It just tells us some information about the solutions. So we're going to look at this table. This is from the textbook, and this tells us what different values of the discriminant will tell us about the graph and the solutions. So if the discriminant is positive, then that means that there are two unequal real solutions, or that the graph will have two x-intercepts. So if the discriminant is greater than 0, or in other words, positive. If the discriminant is equal to 0, then that tells us that there is one solution and that the graph has one x-intercept. And if the discriminant is negative, or less than 0, then that tells us that there is no real solution, but two imaginary solutions. So when we were doing the problems earlier, where when we solved them we had an answer that involved I, those were imaginary solutions. And what that tells us about the graph is that the graph of the parabola will never cross the x-axis. So we're going to look at example 9. It says for each equation, compute the discriminant, then determine the number and type of solutions. So we're going to identify our a, b, and c first, and we are plugging into b squared minus 4ac. So for part A, b is 4, a is 3, and c is negative 5. And after we plug in, we're going to simplify this and get it down to a single number. 4 squared is 16. 4 times 3 times 5 is going to be 12 times 5, which is 60. This is going to be 16 plus 60 because we have two negative signs here, and so that's going to equal 76. Now the question is this positive, 0, or negative? 76 is a positive number, and so this tells us that there's going to be two unequal real solutions. Part B, plugging in, we have negative 6 squared minus 4 times 9 times 1. Negative 6 squared is going to be positive 36. And 4 times 9 times 1 is also 36. So we have 36 minus 36, which is equal to 0. And if the discriminant is 0, exactly 0, then that tells us that there's going to be one solution. And lastly, for part C, when I plug in, I have negative 8 squared minus 4 times 3 times 7. Negative 8 squared is positive 64. And 4 times 3 times 7 is 12 times 7 You can use a calculator if you need to, but that's going to be 84. So 64 minus 84, which is negative 20. So because this is negative, that tells me that there is no real solution, but two imaginary solutions. So the homework questions for these are going to have two parts. First, you're going to have to put in the value of the discriminant, so the number that you calculate, and then you're going to have to select from some multiple choices the number and types of solutions. So whether there are two unequal real solutions, one solution, or two imaginary solutions. So next you should look at checkpoint problem number 9. Do this in your notes, check your answers, and then move on to the homework for this section.